Welcome again to the Circle of Peace. My name is Tisha, aka Minister Letitia Watson. I want to thank you for tuning in tonight. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to my producer Jay for fixing this issue and getting us right back up and rolling. Thank you so much. Tonight we're going to continue the discussion on grief. Again, I said 2 weeks ago, I had my mom up, Reverend Sherry Richardson, and she shared her story and her journey with grief. I received such great feedback and just recognized that there are a lot of people who are going through, and that I wanted to have someone here tonight to help us process this grief. So if you don't mind, I would like to welcome Reverend Dr. Adrenia Tolliver to the Circle of Peace.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Good, good, good. So first, I just want to start off how I do every show. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Well, I am a minister, but I found interest in grief from my own journey. And it's been some years ago, but noticing how grief affected my family and being young, how it affected me. And then when I got older, the loss of my mother really threw me for a loop in the grieving process. And so from just past experience and then being an African American woman and feeling very deeply about my people. And I'm not discriminating, put that out there, but I do feel that as African Americans, that when we deal with grief, it's not something that we easily talk about. And I'm not saying that we always do the best in dealing with it. And I'll just speak for myself because of past experiences. So therefore, I've done studies and so forth, and been, of course, a grief counselor myself. Even did my doctoral work research on the topic. So I am very passionate about helping women, specifically African American women, deal with grief.
Right. So you just led me right into my next question. On a scale from your studies and just from what you've seen personally, on a scale from 1 to 10, how would you rate the African American community and our ability to effectively process the emotion of grief?
Now, this is my opinion.
Right.
Put that disclaimer out there. 10 being the best.
We're doing it.
Okay, so I will say that we're probably somewhere maybe a 6 or 7. And I will say that to say that we and again, this is my opinion, as African Americans, I think we do a really good job in handling and getting through things. Okay. How well we process them in a healthy manner, I'm not 100% sure that we always do that the best way. Do we push through? Do we have resilience? Are we strong? Yes, by all means. But I'm not sure some of us get to a place of actually really processing in a healthy way grief.
Okay. If you don't mind, can you explain the difference between getting through something and actually processing the emotion?
So I think, and I'll speak for myself, getting through. So for instance, when I lost my mom for a good solid year, a little bit more, I got through, right? You do what you need to do to keep going. You got to go to work. You got probably kids to take care of. You got maybe a spouse to take care of. If you're in ministry like I was, you still going to church. You're still doing the things that you need to do to get through. But the reality of it is there's a loss that you're feeling. And it's a deep loss for some. And for me, it was a deep loss. And I did not process and did not want to even process what I was feeling. I just needed to keep going.
Right.
And so I was getting through instead of processing grief.
Okay. And processing, what would processing look like?
Processing is and can be scary.
Hmm.
And I think that's why a lot of times we don't want to process,
Hmm.
because that means we're going to have to feel whatever we're feeling.
Right.
And one of the things that I always tell people when they've lost someone, and they really, you could tell they really are feeling the loss.
Hmm.
And I'm not, and everyone is different. But I say to them, the most important thing that you can do is feel.
Hmm.
Feel whatever you feel.
Hmm.
And that is easy to say, but when you're going through a loss, it's hard to
Right.
feel, because you don't want to give yourself up to the
Yeah.
emotion that comes from that loss,
Right.
right? And so that can look different to a lot of different people.
Hmm.
It may look like anger. It may look painful. It
Hmm.
may look hurtful. It may look like you're going to lose control. But the best thing in order for you to start processing grief
Hmm.
is to feel and allow yourself
Hmm.
to feel whatever you are feeling.
Right.
See, and a lot of us don't want to feel because we know how painful it could be.
Right.
And the fact that we may actually lose control,
Yeah.
but you're not going to lose control, but it feels like you are,
Mhm.
right? And so you don't want to feel that feeling. You don't want to give way to whatever that feeling feels like. But when you actually do, however it looks for you,
Mhm.
you have begun the process of processing grief.
Wow. Let's now get into what are the 5 stages of grief, and if you don't mind providing an example for each stage.
Okay. So Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she first I want to say penned the steps of 5 stages of grief. And really, her study was mainly towards those who were actually transitioning, had terminal illness. And then there was a realization that others also, family members of those who were
Mhm.
terminally ill or who were passing, actually went through some similar stages.
Okay.
And even since then, and I will say this before I give you those stages, that even David Kessler, who co-author a book with her, also added a 6th stage.
Right.
And there's other practitioners as well, grief practitioners out there that have developed and
Right.
added even additional stages or theories
Mhm.
to the grief concept. So I don't want to just say that it's just the 5 stages, but because grief is so broad,
Yeah.
there's a lot of different studies that has occurred with it. But definitely, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross definitely started
Okay.
the attention for us to start looking at grief, because we really didn't look at it.
Right.
But and they don't all go in order,
Right.
okay? And we look at them in a circular fashion, but it does not mean that a person will go through all of the stages, nor will they go in order of the stages. And there's no limit, no time frame for them to go through each stage of the stages. So if you're looking at denial, for instance, denial may be one where, if it's us, we're denying perhaps the loss of a loved one.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, and we just don't want to face the facts
Mhm.
that that person is going to pass or the person has passed. And let me say this, because I don't know if I mentioned this. When we're talking about these stages, and I know we're talking about here the loss of a loved one, you can go through grief with any loss.
Right. Right.
Okay. So any loss that you may experience, whether it be a loss of a relationship,
Mhm.
a loss of a home, a loss of a lifestyle, a loss of what was,
Mhm.
loss of a drink, whatever it is,
Mhm.
you can go through stages of grief. So
Mhm.
we just don't want to limit grief just the loss of a loved one, because any loss that you feel is a loss to you considers the time
Mhm.
and the process of you to go through the
Mhm.
grief
Okay.
process with them. So so denial, and then you have perhaps anger, where you could be angry at the person that perhaps they didn't fight enough. They didn't do what they needed to do to stay alive. If it was an accident, why didn't they have their seatbelt on? Whatever it is. Or you could be angry at God, for
Yeah.
instance. you know or you could be angry at yourself. I should have been there. If I was there, they wouldn't have died. Or things would have been different.
Mhm.
Bargaining, well, if I do this, then perhaps they won't go, or
Mhm.
perhaps I'll get better. I will get healed, or I will get, if I just had a better relationship with God, this wouldn't happen, right? Or even to the point of accepting.
Mhm.
And that will be probably where you want to finally get, but that's where you accept what has happened,
Right. Right.
or is going to happen. Even the person who's in the circumstances of perhaps having a terminal illness, they get to a place where they're like, you know what, I'm okay with this. I'm at peace with this.
Right. Right.
And then depression.
Mhm.
And again, these are not in order,
Mhm.
but there will be a time of depression that you will feel depressed. The problem is when you get stuck,
Mhm.
perhaps in one of these areas like depression,
Mhm.
or denial, or
Mhm.
bargaining, where you just feel like you can't go on another day.
Right.
You don't want to, wake up.
Mhm.
You're sleeping too much. Not sleeping enough. You're eating too much, not eating enough. We're doing other things to make up for. I'm gambling, or I'm spending too much money over here, or I'm drinking, or I'm taking this or taking that because I just don't want to feel what I'm feeling. And so sometimes the grief becomes complicated.
Mm.
And that's definitely when you want to get professional help,
Right. Right.
because all of us at some point, when you're going through a loss, you're going to feel some depression, right?
Yeah.
You're going to feel some of those other things, other stages that I've mentioned. But the
Mhm.
thing is, you want to keep moving through, right? It should be at some point moving through.
Right.
And so when it stays where it seems like you're not progressing, you're not moving forward, that can, like I said, can look like complicated grief, where you want to get some professional help,
Right.
and seek some help for someone to help you get through that process.
Right. There's a question. Can you go through grief years down the road, like after,
Mhm.
years after an actual loss? Can you still go through grief or still grieve?
Because really, the say for instance, if we're talking about the loss of a loved one, you can actually, at least up to a couple years,
Mm-hmm.
feel it,
Right.
strong, like acute grief.
Yeah.
And then after that, you're going to probably slowly start
Mm-hmm.
processing and developing, as David Kessler, the sixth stage, finding meaning, right? You start to have or develop what life looks like
Okay.
without that loved one, or what does life look like now that I'm not in that relationship anymore.
Right.
We call it the new normal,
Mm-hmm.
right? How do I now find meaning in
Mm-hmm.
my life now that it's changed?
Right.
And so you should be slowly getting to that place, but don't be surprised.
Yeah.
I mean, it can hit you like a ton of bricks even after 2 years.
Right. Right.
It really depends on the person. There is no timetable, as I mentioned, to get through any of the stages of grief that you may go through. And no one can force you and say, hey, you should be over that by now, or you should be
Right.
here, or you should be there. No,
Mm.
because everyone is different.
Right.
Everyone deals with grief differently,
Mm.
and it depends how it affects you. It depends on your experience that you may have with grief. It depends on what you consider that you lost, right? So what may be hard for you to handle may not be hard for me, and vice versa, right? And so we need to respect where each other, where we are in the grieving process. And like I said, respect that.
Yeah. You stated when we experience complicated grief, when our grief when it turns into complicated grief, and your suggestion was that we should actually seek outside help. Now, as African Americans, the thought of going to therapy now, it's coming more like, okay, people are more okay with it. But there is still a large part of our community as African Americans who are like, I got Jesus, I don't need a therapist. But here you are, a minister of Reverend, yourself. How important would you say is seeking outside help, therapy? How important would you say that is in helping go through the grief process?
I would say very important. I mean, I always say God made the therapist. Right. God made doctors. I'm also in the healthcare field as well. And I believe in let's do the possible. And let God do the impossible. So God put resources in our path to help us. Now, I do understand from the African American community that we do have some hiccups, some barriers to healthcare and mental health because we don't necessarily trust. And I get that. But I would also say that I think it would be worthwhile for us not to. Finding, like you find a good doctor, find a good therapist, find a good counselor. And if you are really wanting someone strong in the faith, then I would say there are pastoral counselors out there that are licensed. And there are also licensed social workers and counselors as well who have the background also in spiritual counseling, that they can give you godly advice as well. And so my thing is, don't allow the barrier to be there when you need help, because I'm pretty sure someone needs you, right? You have someone, some family member, some child, some grandchild, some niece, some nephew, a spouse, someone needs you, and they need you to be working with all your faculties. And so just like you pray, God put those people in your path to be a good resource to you. And I would say reach out to them and get the help. And you might not, find a good one on the first go round.
Yeah.
I'm all for therapists. I'm all for counselors. Been there, done that. Right there, right now. Because anytime, as a minister, as a counselor, people pour into you a lot, and we need to also pour out so we don't get, bogged down with that as well. And so it could be a heavy burden. And so we also need to research and get some assistance ourselves to deal with things on a regular basis. So my thing is, find the right fit for you, right? The first counselor you find may not be the right fit, even if they are African American. So you want to find, and then some people find that African American may not work for them, right? Being a counselor. So you find the person that works for you if you feel like you need it. But my thing is, if you feel like you need it,
you need it.
You need it. And I know it can be scary if you've never done it before. But trust and believe that when you pray and you go in there, that God is going to meet you there. God is going to meet you there, and he's going to put the right person in your path.
Right. My next question is, does grief, or will grief, look the same for every person?
No. So it depends on what the grief is, what the loss is. The grief is what we feel. Okay. The grief is what we feel. the mourning is what everybody sees. And a lot of times people don't see the mourning.
Mm.
We hide that a lot. And I don't think we do a good job at that in our culture. There are some cultures, especially I was thinking about the Jewish faith, where they actually will wear like a black band around their arm when they had a loss in their family to let people know they're in mourning, right? And I think a lot of us need like a black band.
Right.
We need something over and say, guess what? I'm still dealing with this, even if it's 2 years later. I'm still 5 years. I'm still dealing with this, right? Be gentle with me because I'm still dealing with something. And I think that if, it depends on what is important to you. We go through grief because there is love.
Yeah.
And sometimes we forget that God loved us so. Not only that he gave his only begotten son, but he gave us to be in relationship with others. And so because he loved us so, when that loved one goes on, we feel the love.
Yeah.
And actually, that's a beautiful thing. That we're able to love someone that much and know that they loved us and still love us just as well. And so depending on the relationships, and I mentioned earlier, our past experiences that we may have with grief, also our development, because for instance, if you're younger, you may not have the capability to understand grief. I was mentioning earlier, like when I lost my father, I was young. I was 9 going on 10 years old. I didn't know all the ins and outs about grief stages. And so, and I remember my uncle sharing, because he was the one who had the duty to share that my father had passed. And so we grew up in a church, we were very active in church and so forth. And I knew heaven and hell, right? I knew who God was. And so that's how he explained it to me, that my daddy went to heaven. And I was like, okay. Yeah. Until he said he's not coming back.
Yeah.
And that's when I broke. And so, but I think even after that, I kind of got through it. So you have to understand who's dealing with the grief, where they are in their developmental stages of life, their past experiences, even their relationships as well, because we talk a little bit about attachment theory as we're dealing with grief. You may not be in a certain place with a certain individual.
Right.
And you may have been raised a certain way about relationships that, some people may not have gotten real close to you, and you don't let people get close to you. So therefore you may handle grief differently. Right. Or I should say loss differently than someone else. And so, yes. And then you can have a loss today and it feel totally different when you have another loss 5 years later, because it's two different losses. So we don't expect to feel the same way through every loss.
Yeah. The last time, so we actually had a conversation, kind of a preparatory conversation, previous to tonight's chat, and I felt like you dropped some nuggets.
Okay.
And so I was taking notes, and I actually wanted to share some of those nuggets with our viewers, because I just feel like it will help them out tremendously. So nugget number 1, we a 2. What does that mean? We need a 2 when we are grieving.
So so that's something I did. So I remember, and again, the loss of my father. I remember walking out of the church, and I remember us being in 2s, because I remember that was a thing. I didn't understand it. Okay. And I remember we were in 2s, but for some reason, either I was not with someone, but it
Mhm.
felt like I was alone.
Okay.
And we were walking out of the church, and I remembered I hollered out, I broke down and cried. And my uncle, I believe again, he's gone on to glory, and I'll mention his name, Uncle Nate. I believe he came and he grabbed me because I burst out into tears and cried. And from that point, every time we lined up, and you see I'm feeling it now, lined up in twos in a funeral procession, I always kind of look around to make sure people are in twos.
Right.
Because I understand that having to come down that aisle
Mm.
after losing your loved one, either you're walking to the casket or either you're walking behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're walking by yourself,
Right. Right.
how that feels.
Yeah.
I mean, that's when it hits.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's very important when you're going through a loss to have you, if you can, a support circle, a support team, people that you can be real with, right? People that you don't have to put a front on. I know when I lost my mother, which was one of the hardest griefs that I had to deal with in my life, I didn't sleep for a whole year. Okay. I was functioning in depression.
Yeah.
No one knew it because I put on this show. I was a strong Black woman, which is another issue we could talk about, but and I kept it going because that's what I was supposed to do.
Right.
And I was my insides got messed up. I had GI issues from it. I didn't know it at the time, but I needed people that I could just call. And I did in the middle of the night and just cry. And they would just say, hey, I'm on the phone. I'm on the other end. We didn't really say much. It was just talking, getting stuff out.
Right.
People would come over and just say, and I say, okay, because I can't sleep. And we just stay there and talk until I fell asleep because I had to go to work in the morning.
Right.
And so you need a two. You need at least another one. You need someone to help you get through the process when you're grieving that, and they may not have answers for you.
Right.
You just need somebody to be there and say the ministry of presence, right? Just to be there. I don't have anything to say to you. I may not have anything to offer you, and you might not even want to hear my prayers, but just for you to be there and say, I'm there.
Right.
Even if all you're going to do is cry, I'm here, And so that's why I think the importance of two. Hopefully you got more than two, but if not, you get one good other one to be part of your two to help you through the process as you grieve.
Right. That's good. So nugget number 2 is every loss deserves a grieving period.
Every loss. Sometimes there's a grief called disenfranchised grief, where society tells us that particular issue, incident, situation, relationship doesn't deserve you to grieve over. Disenfranchised law says, no, you need to grieve, but society says, no, you don't.
Right.
And so there's certain things in our life that is considered a loss to us that deserves us to grieve over. And so, for instance, it could be a loss of a relationship. So say, for instance, you are in a relationship, you married perhaps, or you're dating someone and you moved on, but you find out that an ex passed away. Right. Someone that you were really involved in, may have been involved in for years.
Yeah.
Guess what? You're going to feel some kind of way about that death.
Right.
It's okay to experience the loss. But society says no, because you moved on or you married or whatever. But the bottom line is you're human and you had a relationship with someone, you're grieving. Okay.
Right.
And that's okay.
Right.
The loss of a life. So we see all the time where, like for instance, a murderer kills, I say a man.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a murderer, he kills another man,
Mm-hmm.
and now he's going to jail for the rest of his life, and the person that he's killed is no longer there.
Right.
So a lot of times, family members and a lot of I've just seen where it's the mother usually of the deceased. They end up building a relationship with the murderer,
Right.
and helping them, but they also feel sad for the murderer because now they've lost their child, but also now someone's going away to jail for the rest of their life. That's a person that's gone away, right?
Right.
And so there's some grieving that takes place there. Another one that's very common, homosexual relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Society says, well, you're not supposed to be in relationships anyway with someone of the same sex.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you love who you love, right? And so we can't tell people who to love. And so when that person, that other person passes away, that person dies, there's a loss. So you grieve over that person that's gone.
Right.
So disenfranchised grief is when society says you shouldn't, but you know, as a human being, you do. And sometimes we wrestle with that.
Yeah.
And my thing is every loss deserves a grieving period.
That's
Every
good.
loss deserves a grieving period. Even if it's a relationship, we don't have to just talk about somebody passing away.
Yeah.
A relationship ends. You've given your time to it. You spend you've given yourself some sacrifices, and it's over, right?
Right.
It's just not over like talking about it. You go through a
Mhm.
grieving process just like any other loss that you feel.
That's good. We have a question. How can you help someone properly grieve? My grandmother passed away when my mom was 7 years old, and over the course of her life, she had to bury her father and her sister. So, how can we, on the opposite end, of someone else going, how can we help that person get through their grief, go through grief?
Like we talked about, every loss deserves a grieving period. Every person deserves the right to grieve.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we don't allow ourselves because we're so busy taking care of everyone else. And I'm hoping I'm answering this question correctly, the way they need me to answer it. We all need to take time to grieve. And doing that, however, is necessary for the individual. I was talking about the strong Black woman,
Right,
syndrome, and it is such a thing.
mm-hmm.
And the thing is that we can put so much on us.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's not just Black women, but there's some connotation to why we call it strong Black woman,
Right.
and that's not this show. But we put a lot on us. We wear a lot of hats. We have a lot of roles that we're playing, and we're making sure everybody else is okay, and all of that. But the bottom line is we're putting so much on the bridge that the bridge can break.
Yeah.
And when that bridge breaks, it can look real ugly. All that stuff that we tried to hide, it can come out, and it can come out real ugly.
Right.
So I will say, take the time that you need. And people need to be respectful of you taking the time that you need to grieve, especially if you are a caregiver to so many others. How can you be strong for everyone else if you're breaking inside?
Right.
And sometimes we don't think we are worthy enough of taking the time. And that's part of self-care.
Right.
Sometimes we don't think we're not stronger. We don't think we're worthy enough, or we always got to be there for everybody else. But the biggest thing is, the best gift that you can give to yourself is to take care of yourself first. It's nothing wrong with being selfish.
Yeah.
in taking care of yourself.
Right.
Self-care. I think that's one of the biggest things that we've learned in this pandemic.
Yeah.
And as we're trying to get back up to some type of normalcy, we're realizing that all of us are not normal. Or we've developed a new normal on how to handle things.
Right.
Or we realize we're not in a place that we thought we were. And
Right.
we reanalyzing things. We're realizing what things we're going to do, what things we're not going to do,
Yeah.
what we can put up with, what we're not going to put up with. And I
Right.
think putting self-care on the top of our list as a priority is one of those things. And I do say others need to be respectful when you say, I need to take the time to do what I need to do to take care of myself. I'm not necessarily talking about the nails and the hair. If you need nails and hair done, then yes, that's part of it too. I'm all for it, girl. I'm all for it. But I am talking about doing the work mentally and spiritually that it takes to get yourself in a position where you are strong again, where you are whole again, where you can go on and you don't feel like you're going to break at a dime, you know, and I think that's important. And I think we need to do that more.
Right. And as a supporting cast or a supporting member in someone else's life, I saw in the comments what we have in our family. We call it the eyes on you ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Which Reverend Dr. Adrenia Tolliver kind of spearheads. And basically, you know, we crack up about it, but literally, if you are going through, if one of us, if we're going through like a difficult situation, if we're having a surgery, if someone has passed, like she gets in her car, she drives, because she wants to put her eyes on you, because over the phone you can say, oh yeah, I'm okay, but in reality you're probably not. So if I could I need to put my eyes on you to make sure that you are okay. So maybe when we're talking about assisting someone in their grief, maybe it's showing up for them. You know, I hear you on the phone and you're saying you're okay, but no, I need to physically put my eyes on you. And not only that, but we should create a safe space.
Right.
Where we feel comfortable with, if it's crying, if it's yelling, whatever. We don't want to be like Job's friends.
Right.
Go ahead.
Our seniors used to say, and I remember growing up and hearing, you know, I need to see you. I need to see your eyes. That's what they used to say. And they say it like that. I need to see your eyes.
Right.
Look, I need to see your eyes, you know, and they were for real about that. And I really think, because, you know, we say looking into your soul. Well, yes, because your eyes tell everything, right? If you can't look people in the eyes, or you're dealing with something, people are going to see it in your eyes. Your eyes look funny. That, you know, your parents should say that your eyes look funny. Some don't look right. And so, so eyes on ministry, we joke about it, but it is true, because we come from a very strong family of women. And I think, I mean, it's good on one end to be strong, but I will tell you, there is a cost for being strong that we don't talk about. You know, I'm a strong Black woman. I'm strong. But let me tell you something, and I'm speaking from experience. There is a price to pay for being so strong.
It is.
Because, you know, people look to you and sometimes look to you too much. And so when you need to check out, you can't. And people don't respect the fact that you're checking out. So you just mentioned something about the eyes on ministry. But when people say, hey, I need a break. Respect the fact that they need a break. Don't say, well, can you babysit? Can you watch something? No, that means I need a break. Don't bring the grandbabies over here today. Right? Or if you say, you know what, I am taking this Sunday off, because, you know, a lot of us in ministry, I'm taking this Sunday. Guess what? It's okay. Church will go on. Right? They're going to sing the song without you. Somebody going to preach a sermon without you. They're going to pray real hard without you. So you don't have to be there every single minute.
Right.
When you need the time, take the time. And people need to respect your folks need to respect that you need that time for yourself, and whatever that looks like. And it may be a little frightening at first, because I know a lot of us are not accustomed to taking time for ourselves.
Right.
And so you might not want to do a complete day. You might not want to do a 24-hour. You may just want to do a couple hours, go to the park. Go, do something that you enjoy doing that you haven't done in a while. If you like drawing, go somewhere and draw. Do some painting, right? Whatever you feel that you need to do to help you get through the process. There are retreats, and there's retreats that's real cheap retreat. I mean, and not cheap in standard. I mean, expense wise. Right. Where you can go and just, for even a day, you don't even have to spend a night, right? Just to be able to get quiet with your thoughts, and with God, because that's who I'm spending time with, God and myself. And sometimes that can be very scary, because you don't want to deal with those thoughts. But guess what? That's where the process begins, or where it picks back up for you. Right. Is when you get quiet. Because sometimes there's too much going on. The TV's on, the radio's going on. Somebody's talking, somebody doing this. We typing, sending emails, right? We texting. We can't even get quiet with our thoughts and what God even could possibly be saying to us, because there's so much going on. Yeah. But it's hard and it's painful, but yet if you allow it to happen, that's where the process will begin. The healing begins.
Right. Someone in the comments put, "You teaching real good."
Real good. One of the other things that I found out, and I actually wrote about this a little bit, I believe, in my dissertation, is about the collective trauma that we all are experiencing right now. And collective trauma is when it's a group of people that go through something together. Right. And we are, I was on a webinar, and I think it was PDR, that one of the ministers was talking about on the webinar, and said, we come through a pandemic, we came through, and I might not be saying, no, it's CPR. And it was racism, COVID, and I'm missing the third one. Can't think of it. Anyway, but he was talking about, if you came through those things, you went through something. So we all came through a lot of social injustice. We saw a lot of that. Mm-hmm. And every time something happened, for a lot of us, which is some of the post-traumatic slavery syndrome, which is something different. But we also relived some of that when we saw George Floyd. And there were so many others after that were killed. As African Americans, we collectively went through something. Right. And then we also relived some of the intergenerational slavery traumatic incidents that were passed down as well. And so then us coming through COVID as an entire world, right, that was a collective trauma. So I wanted to add this to the grief piece, right, that sometimes there could be a traumatic situation that adds on to your grieving process. And again, that's what's traumatic will depend on you. Right. Now, there are some traumatic things that happen, right? That like a murder, right, things of that nature, a terrible accident that a loved one, someone passes away suddenly. Those can be very traumatic situations. Right. Right. And so, but it doesn't even have to be that. If the person who's experiencing the loss feel that it's a traumatic experience, then you got to add that layer onto their grieving process. So it's just not straight out grief. Now you're dealing with perhaps trauma. Yeah. And if they were there, you're dealing perhaps even with some PTSD. So you got different diagnoses that you perhaps are dealing with. And so that's why I say it's important to talk these things through with someone, because you may be dealing with more than just grief.
Right.
And you might be stuck. So say, for instance, like because of COVID, a lot of us experience a lot of funerals on Zoom.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the things that help push you in the process is going through a church or going to a cemetery and seeing the casket.
Right.
A lot of us didn't see caskets.
Yeah. Right.
So therefore, we were not thrown into the realization that that loved one is gone. So our process of grieving might be stuck.
Yeah.
Because we never saw the normal things that we need to see to know that this is real.
Right. Right.
So it's important to see those kinds of things. So again, that's something added onto it that you might need to push yourself and have a good cry and go somewhere to make you cry, because we know tears are cleansing, to get it out, because you need to get it out.
Yeah.
Because it caused so many other medical and psychological conditions. If we hold that grief in, it's just like stress. It's just like everything else that we deal with if we don't get it out.
Right.
Through journaling, talking with people, exercising, eating well, sleeping well. Those are just basic things that we need to do. And if you're stuck in any of those areas, I suggest that you talk to someone.
Okay. Right. That's good. That leads to nugget number 4 or nugget number 3. Feel what you feel.
Mm-hmm.
God is big enough to handle it.
Yeah. Because some people are afraid to say, God, I'm not satisfied with this decision that you made.
Yeah.
I'm not satisfied that you took my loved one from me. I'm not satisfied that you took my son from me. I'm not satisfied that you took my child from me. I'm not satisfied with that. I'm not happy at all. Right. and I say, feel whatever you feel. We serve a big God.
Amen.
And sometimes we want to put God in a box, but he is big enough to handle whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever we throw at him. And I don't say that to be disrespectful, but I just know, because I know him for myself, that he's big enough to handle whatever I come to him with. So when you say, God, I'm not satisfied with this, I'm mad at you because you ended this relationship, but this is not how it's supposed to be. I waited all my life. You know what I mean? And so whatever you feel, if it's anger, if it's bitterness, if it's depression, just don't stay there too long. That's my thing. Just don't stay there too long. Work through it. Feel it. And my thing is, when you feel it, that's when you should still be processing it. But when you get to a place and you're stuck in it, and you're stuck, and we come back 4 years and you still stuck, you need some help. Or you don't want to get up and open up the blinds. I'm not saying in the beginning, because all of us, even up to 2 years, you might be feeling that way. But if we're still 4 years, 5 years, not opening up the blind, don't want to bathe, you need to get some additional help. Okay. But God is able.
Hey,
he's able. He is. I'm gonna bring him in because I know him for myself. I know it. One of my things is because I was so headstrong, I didn't give myself permission to grieve. And I was in the military at the time when my mother passed, and my chaplain, because my supervisor sent me to see my chaplain because I lost it on the job. And she knew that I had a strong faith. So she said, you know what, maybe you should go see the chaplain. A good idea. But I didn't think he had anything, and he sent him there painting with coveralls on. I'm like, what is he doing? And he's still painting. I'm like, I'm sitting up here boo-hooing, right? Tears. Right. And he said to me, who made you Superwoman? Who told you had to be Superwoman?
Yeah.
And I'm like, huh? Huh? And so he said, you have permission to grieve. You lost your mother. You have permission to grieve.
Yeah.
And it was just him telling me something that simple, that I had permission.
Right.
I got the best cry out. Because mind you, before this, I thought I was going to lose my mind. I thought I really truly was going to lose my mind. And if it wasn't for my son, I know God blessed me with my son
Yeah.
because he's what kept me here. Because the grief that I felt of losing my mother, my best friend,
Yeah.
I felt like was so strong that I didn't want to go on.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go on. And so, and again, no one knew it because that's what I did. I kept it together, but I did not want to go on. And there's one day I just broken like, this is it. I can't go on.
Yeah.
And so when he said that to me, it was such a relief. It seemed like just a weight lifted off of me that guess what? It's okay.
It is.
It's okay.
Right.
And so I I'm very proactive in telling folks, feel what you feel, because if not, it'll come back to haunt you.
Sure will.
And it can come out in some ugly ways, and you don't want that, right? And so go ahead and feel what you feel, even if it's painful, even if it's scary.
Right.
Feel it.
Right.
God will meet you there.
Right. We talked about the misconception of what healing actually is. And so nugget number 4, and I think you may have talked about this earlier, but nugget number 4 is when you allow yourself to feel, that is when you've actually begun the healing process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's when you begun. The place that we don't want to go. We don't want to go there because it hurts.
Yeah.
It's painful, but that's where you need to go. Mm-hmm. And grief is teaching us something a lot of times. And remember, you're grieving because there's love.
Yeah.
So it's okay to love
Mm-hmm.
what you feel like you've lost.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to go ahead and feel it. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's painful, it's hurtful. And I keep saying that because I know what it feels like.
Yeah.
But you need to allow yourself to feel it, because that's actually, you've begun the process of healing.
Yeah.
And the longer you hold it off,
yeah.
Yeah. And it may even get so hard that you don't feel, and you don't want to be cold and hard and not feel.
Yeah.
So you want to allow yourself to feel. And again, I'm speaking for any loss. Whatever you feel is a loss to you, it deserves the grieving process.
Right. Do you have any tips or exercises that you've done, you've tried, or may have even suggested to people you've assisted with while you did your grief counseling that you can provide tonight to possibly assist people with going through the grieving process, making it a bit easier if possible?
Do what you need to do to feel. And so if that means screaming, mm-hmm. I've even suggest you put your head in a pillow, couple pillows, and get your good holler out. Mm-hmm. Or going somewhere where you can do that. There's places that people like to hit things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, people are making money off these places. You know, they're throwing plates, they're hitting, you know, they got axe. Do what you need to do that. If you feel like you just need to run and keep running and keep running, get it out. You know, share some time with someone. Yeah. And again, it just may be them just talking with you. Mm-hmm. Journaling, if that's your thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm not one who journals every day, but I do journal when I feel like I need something to write down. Right. And it may not just be that. You have a phone, right? Pick the phone up. You can record your thoughts. Yeah. You need to get it out of your system so it doesn't start creating things like medical issues on the inside of your body. Right. Any way you can get it out. The presence of the presence ministry. Yeah. Having that too. Yeah. You may not have a large group. I don't have a large group of really good, close friends. The ride or dies. Yeah. I guess you need some ride or dies.
Sure do.
and at this point in stage in my life, I'm not really looking for it. I'm not taking applications. So I got some, right? That we take stuff to the grave with. Y'all know those kind of, right? Right. And I got some girls like that'll back me when I need to be backed, and that will be there and pray with me and hold my hand when I need that too. And so You need those kinds of people. And then there may be family members. And then guess what? It may not be blood related family members. It may be people that you connect with in the spirit, that you, like you, my sister, and guess what? We don't share no same people. We don't have the same bloodline, except for the fact that our spirits connect. I can get with you. And so having another two that you can just share with, I think all those things are good. And again, if you get to a place where you can't share with other people, or you feel like you stuck, I think that will be a good place to get some additional professional help as well.
Right. Well, this has been an amazing discussion, and my prayer is that whoever is on tonight, that this discussion has helped you as much as it helped me, because I had to reach out to her a couple of weeks ago when I was talking to, when I had my mom on, I was talking about my brother. I'm like, look, let me just, because I need to process this myself. So I pray that this show has been a help to those who are watching and who will watch, if you're not present right now. But Reverend Dr. Adrenia Tolliver, do you have any closing remarks or anything that you would like to say to our viewers?
I would just say, allow yourself to feel whatever you're feeling. Give yourself permission to feel, and don't fake it. We have this thing that we say that I know they're in a better place. Yes, we do. But guess what? The reality of it is you still feeling a loss. A birthday's coming, an anniversary's coming, holidays are coming, and that seat is not filled.
Right.
Let's be honest. And so, yes, we know they're in a better place, but the reality of it is, until God calls us home, we're here, and we got to deal with the fact that spiritually they're here, but physically they're not. And how do we deal with that? And so until then, let's get to a place where we can deal with it and not fake it.
Right.
Not fake it, because that's not true healing.
Right.
And I would say, if you're on the person who is helping someone, sometimes they don't want to hear they're in a better place. It's going to be okay. And even sometimes they might not even want to hear your prayer.
Right.
That's real. And so respect that. If you're just giving the ministry of presence, respect what they, and even ask them, what do you need from me? What can I do for you? And let them tell you, instead of you assuming that they need this and they need that. Ask them, what do you need from me? Is there anything I can do? And they may say, well, bringing my loved one back. And we know that you can't do that, right? But just to be there with them, and ask them what they need and be there for that.
Right.